Well, I wonder if you've come across this situation. Have you ever had somebody tell you a joke that only they think is funny? There you are, you're minding your own business, and someone attempts to interject a little life into the atmosphere by retelling a joke that they overheard. They enthusiastically fumble their way through the joke and finally arrive at a punchline where they start roaring with laughter, and you are left uncomfortably silent thinking, really? Was that it? Do you recognize that situation? Have you been in that situation? Have you been the joke teller in that situation? Well, I have to confess that I am in a similar type of danger this morning. I am in the danger, or I should probably say you are in the danger, of me preaching a sermon that only I find interesting. Because we heard in our Numbers reading what's known as the Aaronic blessing, the blessing that Aaron and the priests are instructed to give to the people. God instructs Moses to relay to Aaron and the priests the precise words that they are to use in blessing the people of Israel. And I humbly acknowledge that it could just be that only a priest would find the Aaronic blessing intriguing and exciting. But the fact of the matter is, they are. The fact that God would go so far as to give the Israelite priests specific words to bless the people intrigues me. And when I look at the words used, I am excited about the reality which is proclaimed in our lives. I am enthused and I am encouraged about the truth which is spoken about God's activity for us and his fundamental disposition towards us. And so if you're intrigued as well and excited, then I invite you to pick up your pew Bibles and turn to Numbers chapter 6. Our reading begins at verse 22 with God speaking instructions to Moses. And as I just mentioned, I find it interesting that God goes and gives Aaron and the priest specific words. He doesn't just say, bless them, just bless the people. He says, bless them with these specific words. And the words are specific. In the Hebrew text, the blessing consists of only 12 words, which commentators say reflect the 12 tribes of Israel. The blessing is spoken in 3 separate lines. Each line is longer than the previous one. There is a threefold occurrence of the divine name, which commentators draw Trinitarian implications from. The blessing is specifically constructed to be memorable, to speak specific truths into the lives of the Israelites, not to mention that this blessing fits perfectly in the characters allowed in Twitter. See? Fascinating. Anyone? And just me? The first thing that we need to realize is that a blessing is not a prayer. A blessing is a pronouncement. When Aaron and the priests say to the community of Israel, "The Lord bless you and keep you," this is not a fancy or religious request. This is not a polite statement of hope. It is a statement of fact. You can think of it like this. A blessing, rather than being something said for you, it is something said about you. Fundamentally, the blessing invoked the reality of God's presence in our lives. For Israel, it invoked the reality of the covenant, that God had chosen the people of Israel and entered into a relationship with them. Think of a renewal of vows. We probably all know people who have decided after numerous years to have a ceremony where they speak again the words of their covenant to each other. And it's not that the vows got broken along the way. It's not that the vows no longer are the reality for these two people, but the ceremony is a reminder to the reality which enfolds the two people presently. And it also speaks to their individual commitment to that reality, to each other. It is in this manner that Aaron and the priests say, "The Lord bless you and keep you." It reminds the individual of the reality that enfolds their life, of God's covenantal love and grace for them. It serves to remind them of God's commitment to them and to their relationship. And so in this sense, it speaks to something not fanciful, not removed, but something very concrete in their life. You know, I know in my own ministry as a priest, I have sometimes viewed, or often viewed, the blessing or the times that I have been asked to say a blessing as, oh, that's just a fancy little prayer that priests get to say. And I viewed it like that. And maybe you viewed it like that as well, that a blessing is just a fancy prayer. But it's not. It's a declaration of something very concrete, very real about who you are and the reality that encircles you. The Lord bless you. The Lord is there with you to bless you, to bring you his divine blessing. The Lord keeps you. The Lord keeps you in his hand to guide you, to protect you, and to work with you. It's fabulous. It's wonderful. Aaron and the priests, they're instructed to continue. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The statement of making his face shine upon you is about God's desire to have his presence known in our lives. God desires to be known. God wants to be known in our lives. God wants to be recognized in our lives. He's not hidden. He's not removed. There's a passage in Isaiah that says, "I have not spoken in the darkness." God is evident. God is here. The Lord make his face to shine upon you speaks to that, God's desire to be known in our lives. Again, it speaks to that covenant of relationship, but this time it speaks about intimacy. If you remember, there's an account in Exodus where God allows Moses to catch a glimpse of his glory. Not the whole glory, because he can't see the whole glory and live, but just a glimpse of it. And it's this tremendous and profound moment of intimacy between Moses and God. Aaron and the priests declare to the people that God's face is intimately turned toward them. That the focused, that the intentional, that the power-filled presence of God is directed upon their lives in a gaze of love and grace. I racked my brain to try to find some sort of contemporary example for this. I could only come up with two. And none of them are really good examples. So, like the first example of having somebody whose gaze is continually and just focusedly at you is when somebody says to you, usually with an air of disapproval and judgment, "I have my eye on you," or "I'm watching you." They may not even say the words. They may just do this. Not a good thing to have happen, is it? And the second is this. Big brother is watching you. You know, this ominous force that just kind of notices all our faults and wrinkles. Neither of these are good things. But that's not what this phrase is about. But how often do we think that that is how God gazes upon us? We can easily think that God is like Big Brother, that ever watchful presence who records our faults and our mistakes and silently holds them above our heads. God has his face towards us, and that can only mean a gaze of judgment and wrath. "I'm watching you." And yet this is not what we see of God. This is not who God announces himself to be in the words of this blessing. God's face is intimately turned towards us in grace. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. God's face turned towards us in focused intimacy is nothing but love and mercy and grace. God's presence is a